Coming up, Nick Saban may be about to be very cruel to a few SEC coaches, and we're about to find out, is Auburn ready for its close-up? We'll talk about it all next, right here on AT&T SEC Country Live. Hello everyone and welcome to AT&T's SEC Country Live. My name is Brandon Adams. This is the former Alabama All-American Mike Johnson as we get ready to move into another week of SEC action. A lot of storylines on the table. And, you know, Mike, one of the things that I think you can start to see taking shape here is that we're clearly separating the haves from the have-nots in the SEC.
We are.
You get this handful of teams that feel pretty good about where they may be going this season, and another probably bigger than a handful, maybe two full handfuls right now, who are trying to scramble to figure out what it's all going to go from here.
Yeah, you got the teams on the top of the mountain, you got some on the bottom, and then there's also a couple in between that we can't really figure out. A&M, Florida, a couple of those teams. So we'll try to dig into that later too.
Yeah, we'll talk about it all here on AT&T SEC Country Live. By the way, AT&T SEC Country Live is brought to you by AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. And speaking of the haves and the have-nots, and in this case a have against the have-nots, let's do item number one on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. You were actually bringing this up to me before the show started today, and I hadn't quite put all this together, that over the next 4 games, it'll stretch over the next 5 weeks, Alabama is actually going to get a chance to go up against a lot of these coaches that we'd sort of think of as kind of hot seat coaches here for 2017. I think we have the Alabama schedule we can take a look at here over the course of the next few weeks. It's Texas A&M here this week, and then after that, you've got a few other games as well. We'll show you the graphic here on the screen in just a moment, but games against like LSU, you've got an Arkansas in the mix there. Here we go. Arkansas on the 14th, Tennessee third Saturday in October. Then after a bye week, it's the LSU game on November the 4th. And really what's interesting about this is all 4 of these games are against coaches right now solidly on the hot seat. Is Nick Saban going to get a few of these coaches fired here over the course of the next few weeks?
I would say that there's a good chance. And listen, I don't think normally if you come to battle and you play some of these games and these games are, you know, say 31 to 21 or 31-14, no, I don't think that's going to get it done. But the way that Bama has played the last couple of weeks, the lopsided victories, I can also see those kind of games playing out against some of these teams coming up. I don't know that Arkansas is going to put up a ton of fight.
Yeah.
I don't know that Kellen Mond has what it takes to really mount a great offense against this Alabama defense. And so for that kind of scenario, if it does get lopsided, I could see a scenario where, you know what, a guy like Butch Jones or Brett Bielema or Kevin Sumlin on the other end of a 40-point beating from Alabama does find themselves without a job on the next Monday.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where a lot of these coaches and a lot of the SEC coaches who are thought to be in trouble are kind of thought to be that way in some regards because of the, I don't know, altered expectations that exist in the SEC because of just how much that Nick Saban has won. But this is actually a little different scenario than that because it would actually be Saban who kind of does the beating here. I think you can put a few of these guys into a category, and maybe Ed Orgeron's in a category all by himself. In the case of Butch Jones, Kevin Sumlin, Brett Bielema, they've been on the job for a while, and in some cases their message may be getting at least a little bit stale, or in some cases the fans are outright pointing at ways in which they're not getting it done. Orgeron's sort of a separate category in that this is his first time going up against Saban, but I don't care how bad the LSU season ends up being, the standard is still the same. LSU as a program is expected to compete alongside with Nick Saban. So he may be one of the guys that has a chance of saving some good favor with his fans by having play well there. But he's probably one of the guys that's a little safer than maybe Jones, Bielema, Sumlin might be.
Yeah, I definitely think so, and here's why. In my opinion, Ed Orgeron is safe from getting fired this year because the guy that would do the firing, Joe Oliva, is going to go right out the door behind him if he has to fire Ed Orgeron. It's going to say, you know what, we got to fire Ed Orgeron. We got to pay him a $12 million buyout. Well, you know what? See yourself out too, Joe Oliva, because you're the one that made that hire and you're the one that put that buyout on the line. I definitely think a lot of these guys are on the edge. You know, a couple of lopsided victories away from getting fired, especially when you talk about Butch Jones, the way their team has looked the last couple of weeks. I think he's definitely in danger of being one of those guys. I think the question you have to ask yourself if you're one of these ADs is who are we going to bring in next? Are we going to find somebody better than the one we have in place already? And that's where you start to take the next steps.
Let me hit a few of the comments in the comments section. Isaac Berry says it's Coach O, talking about Ed Orgeron, one of the coaches we just showed you over the series of the next 4 games for Alabama. Is he on the hot seat already? For me, Orgeron's not on the hot seat right now because I think that LSU's kind of handcuffed is what they can do with Ed Orgeron at the moment. So I don't think hot seat status is probably appropriate here, but as Alex Hickey, who joined us, who covers LSU for SECCountry.com, said yesterday, privately, does LSU maybe wish they hadn't hired Ed Orgeron? That's a different conversation. Privately, that might very well be the case, but there's not much they can do about it in the first half of his first year on the job.
Yeah, I agree with it. And that's kind of what my question was to Alex Hickey yesterday. I didn't feel like this was approached as a rebuilding job when Ed Orgeron was given the job. They talked about continuity. They talked about keeping the same staff in place and just kind of adding some pieces here and there. And they would try to hit the same stride that they had under Les Miles. Now it's taking the tone of a rebuilding job. Now it's been rebranded. All of a sudden, the cupboard was empty, and now we don't have a ton of talent on the team, and we have to restructure what we're doing. So it's definitely a difficult scenario. I think that all of these ADs included, especially the ones at Tennessee and at LSU, are trying to be careful of what they do, because when you look at what has happened at LSU, when you look at what has happened at Georgia, two opposite ends of the spectrum. You have to have one of those guys left that you're going to be able to hire on the opposite side of these firings.
John Rosado says, could we be looking at one of these coaches getting fired after the beatdown that comes from Nick Saban? And that goes back to something you and I have debated a lot so far this season, even some of your predictions in the offseason that at least one of these guys, Butch Jones, would get fired during the season. And, the closer we get to that button being pushed, I'm just not so sure that's actually going to happen during the season. And for me, it's almost the opposite of a reason why you suggested it might happen a month or so ago, that the early signing period might make these programs a little more likely to accelerate this process. But by firing a coach during the season, you send your recruits kind of scattering in a bunch of different directions. Yeah. It doesn't give you a lot of time after the season's over to kind of bring them back together and get them back on board before December comes around, which might actually be a sort of negative point about firing a coach during the season.
Well, and I think it's a fine line. I think the way that you bring those recruits back to Tennessee is you hire a great coach on the other side. You have to have a name brand coach if you're going to bring those guys back around. I think the earlier they get it done, the better off they'll be as far as recruiting goes. Because listen, there's no debating. Tennessee, you can debate what they'll be next year and what Butch Jones is a head coach. There's no debating that right now they're in a downward spiral. And maybe he can pull maybe he can pull that jet engine up, and maybe they can take back off again. But you had a guy yesterday transfer. You have another recruit who's announcing that he's taking a bunch more visits now. It's tail spinning in that direction. And I think that the athletic department there really has to make a change before it starts going any deeper and you can't get any of these recruits back.
Speaking of coaching changes, Daniel Robbins, a Tennessee fan, says we need a man like Mike Johnson to come and coach UT. You go throw your hat in the ring for consideration there?
Oh, man, I tell you what, that's a little more hours than I'm willing to work at this point in my life. I'm sorry.
Isaac Berry also says no to Bob Stoops. I don't know about that. I think that I'd love to see Stoops get in the mix for one of these SEC jobs. I think that's an interesting name to kind of put here in the SEC. We'll have more on these subjects coming up later on, including your comments here on AT&T's SEC Country Live. Let me move on to item number 2 here on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So we've seen 2 consecutive blowouts for Auburn against Mississippi State this past Saturday, Missouri the week before that. We'll actually talk to Benjamin Wolk with the Auburn Tigers about 10 minutes from right now. But now the stage turns to Ole Miss on Saturday, a team that we just saw Alabama give a historic level beatdown to this past weekend, and now it'll be Ole Miss's turn to play the Rebels. Auburn coach Gus Malzahn did do this today preview what he expects to see from Ole Miss a little bit, including kind of an early start time for his team. Here's Gus Malzahn.
I have the Ole Miss Rebels at home, 11 a.m. kick. That'll be the earliest we played so far, so we'll have to be ready for that. When you look at Ole Miss offensively, really the thing that stands out to me is their offensive skill. I think at the receiver, I think they're as good as anybody in the league. I think their quarterback is a guy that can really make things happen when things break down. He has a little Johnny Manziel in him as far as being able to create things on his own.
So Shea Patterson, a little bit like Johnny Manziel, Gus Malzahn says, but it didn't look like Manziel against Alabama last week because Manziel actually beat the Crimson Tide in 2012, and Shea Patterson a long way away from that for Ole Miss this past Saturday. So I'll ask you, in order to kind of keep pace with the conversation here of Auburn being back and Auburn being a threat to Alabama and Auburn being a program that deserves its spot there in the national attention, the national conversation, does Auburn need to kind of put out another big blowout this Saturday? Does it need to put up a score similar to what Alabama, or at least as close as it can get to what Alabama did last week, if it wants to stay in that serious conversation for a team that's put the Clemson loss behind it?
Listen, this is how I look at it. I don't see it that way. And I guess I just look at it from a player's perspective, and obviously I've heard this a million times from Coach Saban, so maybe that's just the road I go down. But all you got to do is take care of this week. You got to win the game because the way Auburn's schedule shapes up, they're going to get their shots. They're going to play Georgia at the end of the year. They're going to play Alabama at the end of the year. They're going to possibly play, maybe even, if they're able to beat Alabama, a rematch with Georgia again in the SEC championship game. So they're going to get their licks. This is not a style points kind of matchup. You've got the college football playoff now. The top 4 are going to get in. The way Auburn's schedule matches up, they're going to have their opportunities against these teams. If they show up and get a win, that's all Auburn needs to do this weekend in my book. I don't need to see the blowout. I don't need to see score matching. I don't need to see you do those different things. Just continue to show up, get better in the ground game, get better up front, and have Kevin Steele's defense show out like they had the last couple of weeks, and everything else to take care of itself.
John Rosado in the comment section says, no, Auburn doesn't need a blowout here. It just needs to show up for its last 2 home games. Obviously, reference to the Georgia game, the Alabama game, the 2 rivalry games that Auburn's lost a lot recently. But the truth is, Auburn can't play Georgia and Alabama this week. It's got to play Ole Miss. Yeah. And, I'm just kind of curious where this Auburn conversation goes. Now, obviously, a win against the Rebels counts just the same. But I'm trying to put forth this narrative that Auburn is a real contender to Alabama in the SEC West. It is a little harder to sort of make that claim and push that narrative if Alabama's beating Ole Miss 60-something-3 and Auburn's, winning the game by 10, 14 points. It's a little bit harder to push that narrative, is it not?
Well, it definitely is. It definitely is. That's why it's called a narrative, and that's what, that's what's for the media, and that's what's for the magazine writers and the columnists and everything like that. But if I'm on that team right now, to take the words from Al Davis, just win, baby. That's all we got to do. We just got to win. We just got to score more points than the other team each week. And Auburn is still developing. They're still getting over some injuries. They're still finding out, a lot about their backup quarterbacks. They're trying to get all their running backs healthy and get back on the field, figuring out a lot about their offensive line. Keep just winning and getting that direction. I think once you get to the end of the season, if you're Auburn, you'll be who you want to be. I don't think you were that team against Clemson. I don't think Clemson got Auburn's best shot, but they continue to improve. They continue to do great things on defense and stuff the opponent's running game and passing game, and they will be where they want to be at the end of the year.
In the comment section, Michael Collins says the Auburn front seven's for real. Jeremy Jackson says the Auburn run game and passing game is going to thrive. And I think that's kind of the interesting conversation, picking back up where we were yesterday, that a lot of ways his Auburn identity has kind of evolved here. Now, Jared Stidham was co-SEC Player of the Week this week, so that offense is kind of coming along here. But this has really been a team, as Michael kind of pointed out in the comment section, that so far has been identified and defined by its defense. A much better defense than really, I think, at any point in time in the Gus Malzahn era. Kevin Steele did not look like a good hire when it was made. It looked like sort of a scrap heap. Hey, just sort of settle for a guy because you had to find a replacement for Will Muschamp. But Steele has been a better DC than Muschamp was, better than what Brian Van Gorder was. He's been the best defensive coordinator that Gus Malzahn's ever had. Yeah. I don't know that anybody would have seen that coming.
No, I don't think so. And especially after Will Muschamp walked out the door, you wonder what the Auburn defense will become. They've gotten better. I mean, they really have. They are a force up front. They've got a great linebacking core, and they're playing with a high intensity. I think Kevin Steele, how long has Kevin Steele been in coaching? 35 years. I know the guy a while. He's been around the block. He's been under a ton of great coaches when you look at his resume. So he knows how to bring that intensity. He knows how to bring that passion to the defensive side of the ball. And right now they're playing at a high level. I don't think you can knock anything Auburn's done on the defensive side of the ball. I don't quite have them as a defensive unit as high as I have Georgia or Alabama, but they're not asked to do a lot of the same things that Georgia and Alabama are done, and I think they've had an incredible last couple of weeks facing Missouri and Mississippi State.
We will get more on the Auburn story from Benjamin Wolf coming up in just a moment here on AT&T's SEC Country Live. For now, let's get ready to look at item number 3 on our list, and kind of an interesting situation unfolding for Georgia. Now, Georgia's winning and flying high. They're ranked number 5 in the country according to the AP poll, but there's an interesting subplot kind of bubbling below the surface. What's going to happen for Georgia quarterback? Right now, the job belongs to Jake Fromm. At least we thought it did for the Vanderbilt game, although Kirby Smart stopped just short of that on Monday, saying he wasn't ready to name a starter for that game. But the one thing he will tell you is having both Fromm and Eason makes him feel better about his quarterback situation. Here's Kirby from Monday.
Yeah, you got to feel better that you've got 2 that have played, because we've certainly got that. But I'd say this, I felt much better going into the season. I'm talking post-scrimmages, post-camp. Felt much better about the quarterback situation because of the camp that Jake Fromm had and the growth that Jacob Eason had. So I did feel better, although you could say, well, you've never seen Fromm play. I count scrimmages as playing because we set them up like games. I got to see him in the spring game. So felt much better that we had those 2 guys that could execute at a high level and do good things. They're different quarterbacks, but in some ways they do some of the things similar. They'll continue to compete in that regard.
So it's an interesting scenario here. Georgia's got 2 quarterbacks, and they're both potentially good. The problem, though, is that Kirby Smart apparently is not quite sure which one he wants to play, which one he wants to start for Vanderbilt, and probably all the games going forward. So given what you know about football, being in a lot of locker rooms at both the NFL and the college level, for Georgia, is this a good or bad situation to have potentially 2 capable quarterbacks and having to decide in the month of October, by the way, which one to play?
I think it could be a very good scenario for Georgia. I think if everything pans out the way that Kirby Smart is trying to mold this team, then this could be a very good scenario for Georgia. I think what you see right now is Kirby. This is my opinion. You're close to the Georgia program. You tell me. I think what you see right now is Kirby Smart trying to toe the line of naming Jake Fromm the starter, but losing Jacob Eason, his attention. Yeah. I think that he's got to be careful here. He needs Jacob Eason as the backup. I think we've seen Bryce Ramsey enough to know that, that's not the guy that's going to carry him to the championship. And so I think with Jacob Eason in his back pocket, he wants to keep Jacob Eason in tune. He wants this guy to show up and stay prepared and continue to compete for the job. And by not naming Jake Fromm the runaway starter, I think that's what he's trying to do. Hey, let's not only keep Jacob Eason in the building, keep him from transferring mid-year, but let's keep him in tune to the offensive game plan, because as Kirby Smart and his Georgia Dogs know, that starter can go down in a heartbeat, and all of a sudden you're having to tune to the backup quarterback. That's the game plan I see Kirby kind of going in with. Hey, Jake Fromm's our guy. He's going to continue to be our guy, but I'm going to say just enough to this quarterback room to keep both of these guys paying attention, because I need both of them in the end.
I see it slightly different, although I agree with a lot of what you're saying there. On my show, Dog Nation Daily, one of the things I referenced today was what Gary Danielson said on CBS on Saturday when he said, this is Jake Fromm's team now. And for me, that's too much too soon here, because the way I would describe this, Mike, is it's Jake Fromm's team for now. I think Jake Fromm should be the starter against Vanderbilt. I think he's played too well, even with some hiccups against Tennessee. I think he's played too well to take him out of the game. But it's not abundantly clear to me that Fromm is going to have such a stranglehold on this job that Kirby shouldn't consider going back to Jacob Eason for Florida, or going back to Jacob Eason for Auburn, or an SEC championship game where Georgia to get there. I think Fromm is ahead of Eason, because I think Fromm has played better at times during his run as a freshman than Eason ever did last year. I think he's supposed to be the starter for that reason. But it's not that, in my opinion, Fromm's got such a lead over Eason that you couldn't consider going back to Eason, which sets you up for turning a good situation potentially into a bad one, because Kirby Smart, it is possible for a coach just to make the wrong decision here, or make a decision that kind of blows up in your face.
Well, exactly, and I think that's the route kind of Kirby is thinking about. Listen, Kirby, for all the good things that have happened this year, I don't know that he has the background that maybe a guy like Nick Saban employs, where he can make a decision like that and nobody will question him. I think people would question Kirby Smart, especially if Jacob Eason trots out there and throws a pick in a meaningful game or a meaningful spot. Not only are the fan bases going to start to ask questions, but even worse, the team, you might start to lose the locker room. And some of those guys might be on Jake Fromm's side. Hey, we were so good on Jake Fromm, and then you put Jacob Eason in there and he put us in bad situations. Kirby Smart has to defend against that. He doesn't have the kind of background that Nick Saban does, not at this point, to where he can make that decision and it's just a runaway success. And you just say, you know what, we're going to trust in him because he's led us in the right direction. Kirby Smart, in his second year, still has the ability to get questioned, not only by the fan base, but by some of his team players.
Let me hit a few comments in the comment section. Marvin Roach says, we need them both right now. Marvin, I believe you're probably right about that. Jimmy Barnes says, Fromm won't transfer if Eason gets his job back. I do think Eason would transfer if Fromm wins the job. A lot of Georgia fans probably agree with that. Yep. James Crump talking about how the quarterback situation for Georgia this year much better than it was last year. Josh Conkle saying it all depends on if the 2 quarterbacks are up to fighting for the starting position without transferring out. And Josh, and I know you know this, I know a lot of the fans of this as well, this idea that you can prevent someone from transferring now, that's not the way it works anymore. Yeah. Quarterbacks leave, quarterbacks transfer, and Georgia, like all the other power SEC teams, is going to try to recruit an elite quarterback each and every year, so that door swings both ways. Quarterbacks want to be played, and if they don't, they want to go somewhere else. And programs expect quarterbacks to come in and play well right away, and if they don't, they're shopping for another guy.
Yeah, and I think what you see right here, especially at this point in the year, because we saw it at Alabama and Blake Barnett last year, left in the middle of the year, and it was able to kind of retain a year of eligibility. That's not what you want to happen here, and I think Kirby Smart is playing this very smartly, where he looks at both of these guys, not only continues to get them both in the program, but they continue to compete against each other week in and week out. Hey, you're close, you need to work on this. You're close, you need to work on that. Let's try to get better in that week, and we'll figure out who the starter is at the end of the week. Both of those guys will be very attentive to this process the next couple of weeks.
We'll get Benjamin Wolk here in just a moment. Let me hit a few more of the comments here on AT&T SEC Country Live before we do that. Jackson Johnson says Georgia's better with Jake Fromm than it is with Jacob Eason. A lot of Georgia fans probably agree with that. Travis Whitehall says the quarterback situation is a good one because the battle brings out the best in both guys. I think it's definitely true that it's brought out the best in Jake Fromm. I think he's played better because of the competition. what will be interesting to see, Mike, is if Jacob Eason also rises his level of play because of that competition.
I definitely do, and I think a lot of the questions that surrounded, maybe not from Georgia fans, but some of the fans on the outside looking in, was how into it was Jacob Eason? How hard was this guy studying? I'm not going to question his love for the game. That's not what I'm here to do. But at some point, he did look overmatched as far as game planning goes, and I think everybody wants to see that part of it come out. Jake Fromm, for everything that, for every question you might have about him, the guy has come in prepared. The guy looks like he has command of this offense and knows exactly where the ball needs to go. I would need to see the same thing from Jacob Eason in practice before I, even attempt to try to put that guy back in a game scenario.
All right, coming up in just a moment, Butch Jones speaks out on his hot seat status. Cornered by a reporter, what do you have to say? We'll let you hear that. That's Mike Johnson. My name is Brandon Adams. It's AT&T SEC Country Live. As I said, AT&T is a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Before we hear from Butch Jones, though, let me turn our attention to Auburn, Alabama, where Benjamin Wolt joins us here on AT&T's SEC Country Live, covering the Auburn Tigers and Auburn recruiting. And Ben, welcome back to our program. It is great to have you with us. Let me ask you a version of the same question that I believe I probably asked you last week, and I may ask you here over the course of the next several weeks. Auburn gets another comfortable blowout win over a pretty good Mississippi State team last Saturday. Is this the final signal that Auburn truly is back, and is the bandwagon filling up there on the plains once again?
I don't know if, a lot of people jumped off the Gus bus, as they call it, in Auburn after the Clemson game, and I don't think the Mercer game really helped much either. But I think that it's starting to trend back in the right direction for him. I mean, we met with Gus Malzahn today, and he was certainly in a good, happy mood, felt like things are trending in the right direction for them. I mean, I think that what we're seeing with Auburn's offense is really what Gus Malzahn and Chip Lindsey sort of expected, with Jarrett Stidham having some of that rust that he needed to knock off after, taking a year off after transferring from Baylor. Auburn's offense is really clicking right now, and it hasn't even had Cameron Petway, who's returning rusher in the entire country. He hasn't even been fully healthy. So I think that if he can get back to full health, this Auburn offense has the opportunity to accomplish a lot. And then on top of that, I mean, the defense since week one against Georgia Southern, then going into Clemson, and now coming into SEC play, the defense has been absolutely exceptional. Only team in the country so far that hasn't allowed more than 14 points in a game.
Ben, I'm anxious to get your take on this, too. I'm glad you brought that up about the running backs, because one of the things that I've noticed has been maybe a play calling change. And I don't know if it's because Clemson's D was so good or Auburn's offense has just kind of evolved. What have you noticed the difference in Chip Lindsey since that Clemson game, and how have they gotten better at that?
Well, the reality of it, too, with that Clemson game, I mean, Gus Malzahn's, for lack of a better term, I mean, his willingness to sort of micromanage things was still there a little bit, and I think that dipped in to the Mercer game as well. But I think that Chip Lindsey really has taken full control of the play calling sheet. He is doing everything now when it comes to the offensive side, and Gus Malzahn really has assumed that head coaching role that he admitted at times throughout the offseason was going to be hard for him to just be completely hands-off on offense. Now that Chip Lindsey, like you said, he's sort of gotten into his own, he's sort of developed his own play calling style, his own strategy. I think that you're seeing more of what to expect from Auburn going forward offensively, and I think that you're exactly right. Chip Lindsey is where that all starts.
Let me go to the defense for a moment. You mentioned how well that group's played. We actually talked about that a little early in the show as well. Mike Mahortis from the comment section talking about the absence of Byron Coward, his decision to leave the program. And really, when you don't get a big contribution from a former #1 player in the country, or at least a very highly ranked player in the country, the defense ought to suffer. But Auburn's defense has been just fine because of a lot of the players you've been covering here over the last couple of years. Guys like Derek Brown, other names that are in there, Dontavius Russell, are in there, competing and doing really well. Kind of give us a little bit of an idea about how Kevin Steele and Gus Malzahn, how they put this group together, this frankly very elite-looking defense at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, look, when you looked at Auburn's defense coming into the year, you said, all right, Carl Lawson's gone and Montravius Adams is gone. Is their defensive line going to be able to produce? Well, Jeff Holland has filled into Carl Lawson's role, and I think even to the surprise of Auburn coaches, has maybe excelled more than Carl Lawson even did. I mean, Dontavius Russell has been exceptional at defensive tackle, as has Derek Brown, like you mentioned. Marlon Davidson, I mean, he's an elite defensive end. Nick Coe, I think, might be the guy that has sort of glued this all together, because he's someone that is freakishly athletic. I mean, he's a wrestler by nature. When he came into Auburn, he was like a stick, and now he's really developed his body, and they can put him at defensive tackle or defensive end. And then you look at their freshmen. I mean, they've got Marcavius Bryant, who has been on the field more than I would have expected him to be, and he's even in a defensive end role more than that buck defensive pass rusher. I mean, when you just look at the sheer numbers of athletes that Auburn has on the defensive line, it makes it pretty easy to see how you can lose a guy like Carl Lawson and Montravius Adams and still keep up, this trend on the defensive line. And, Auburn's defense has been getting a lot of praise, but I think that as much praise as Auburn's defense has been getting, Kevin Steele still has not gotten enough praise for what he's done turning this Auburn defense around from where it was 2 years ago.
Ben, we always love having you here on AT&T's SEC Country Live, and we love your coverage of Auburn and Auburn recruiting every day there at SECCountry.com, including your daily recruiting notebook. Thanks for being with us. We'll look forward to speaking to you soon and look forward to reading a lot more from you in the days ahead there at SECCountry.com.
Awesome, guys. Thank you so much.
Great stuff with Benjamin Wolk. Love having him on the program. Let me shift gears here and go to item number 4 in our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. As promised, I want to give you a chance to hear a little bit from Butch Jones. He was speaking at the Memphis Touchdown Club, got cornered by a reporter. Jessica Benson was there to get some really good stuff from him. And what you hear here from Butch Jones is a somewhat willingness to embrace the hot seat status, knowing that kind of comes with the territory here in the SEC. I'm not sure how Tennessee fans are going to feel about this, but here was Butch Jones' response to kind of where he finds himself professionally at the moment.
That's part of being a head football coach. I think that kind of comes with the territory. That's nonsense, but it's out there. But again, you put blinders on and you go to work each and every day. We have a great, passionate fan base, and they're very, very loyal. And we're working hard each and every day, and it's a long, long football season. And the coaching staff, the players, we understand that. But there's 7 games left to be played, and there's a lot out there to play for. So we just have to stay the course and continue to work each and every day.
There's an element of, I almost start to feel a little bit sorry for Butch Jones right now, because there are a lot of moments when I think Jones has just said the wrong thing. I think he's actually made his scenario worse at Tennessee because of some of the things that he said. But when you are clearly on the hot seat, and when most of your fans probably wish you were gone, and yet you've still got to go plugging ahead and try to lead your team and go out there and make the most of the season, there is no good answer to that question. So I'm actually not even going to criticize Butch Jones that much for that. I think he's saying about the only thing he can say right there.
Yeah, and listen, I can't remember the outlet, but you hear it from Houston Nutt yesterday where he says, listen, if your name's not Nick Saban and you coach in the SEC, you're on the hot seat. That's just the bottom line. Week in and week out, all these guys are going to be on the hot seat. I don't think there's any coach in the SEC, maybe other than Nick Saban, that feels like that their job is 100% secure at this point in time. And you're right. That's the best answer Butch Jones could have given. And it's a sad scenario because, he's a person, he's got a family, he's got, children, he's got to deal with all this. This is life for him. This is not just a TV show he turns on SportsCenter and sees his name on the hot seat. He's got to deal with this day in and day out. He's got to continue to sell the program. He's got to meet with boosters. He's got to meet with the recruits. So this is a question he's getting a lot, and that's the best answer he can give at this point.
Corey Tester in the comment section says he sounds like a car salesman. Corey, I actually don't feel like that from Butch Jones there. There's no bill of goods being sold there whatsoever. This is, hey, I got to go out there and do the best that I can, which is what he has to do. Now, Corey, what I would be interested in is he telling his team the truth. And you played for a coach that got fired. So you actually can speak about this because Mike Schuler recruited you there at Alabama, and you watched him lose his job. Is the coach telling the truth behind the scenes? When it's no media, when the doors are closed, is Butch Jones then saying, hey, guys, you know what? I'm not promised next year. Neither are you. None of us know what our future holds. So let's go out and make the most of our present opportunity. I mean, is that what the coach is saying? Is he being more real and more honest with his players? Because I would sort of hope he is.
No, I don't think so. I don't see it that way because I think when you do things like that, we didn't obviously have that under Mike Schuler. And it was still up in the air that he was going to get fired all the way until the end of the season. But to me, if you're doing that, you're losing the players emotionally. I think they start playing with so much emotion that they can't even, keep it under guard. They can't start to play play-by-play because they're thinking, man, if I don't play well right now, my coach is going to get fired. And that's not going to lead anybody into a good place. So I think if you're Butch Jones, I know it sounds like, a lot of coach speak, but you just go day to day. And you try to get better in that day. You try to get your players to do better that day. And you approach every bridge when you come to it. And I think that's all he can do right now. I've talked a million times this year about how some of these head coaches, their team starts to take on their personality. I think that's the truth with Florida. I think that's the truth with Georgia and Alabama. To me, this team has taken on Jones's personality. And I don't know if that's led them to being soft, but last week they lacked a counterpunch. And I think you're starting to see that personality come out from Butch Jones when he has to answer these questions. He just lacks a comeback to a lot of different things.
Daniel Robbins asked a really straightforward and interesting question. He says, BA, what is your opinion on Butch Jones' coaching skills? I think Butch Jones is ultimately going to be undone at Tennessee for 3 reasons. Reason number 1, he should have never hired Mike DeBoer as his offensive coordinator, a guy who was essentially out of coaching. That was an unorthodox hire for a program like Tennessee. That ought to be reaching for the very best. And to follow up DeBoer with Larry Scott was kind of an unimaginative type hire. I think Jones was undone there. I think Jones made a swift, bold move by hiring Bob Shoop. Spent big money. That was a huge free agent acquisition. I actually thought stealing Shoop from Penn State was going to really work for Tennessee. So far it hasn't. I don't think you can fault Jones for that. It's just bad luck. It didn't work out. But the thing that's ultimately going to kill Butch Jones is, and this is not something that's on a lot of people's radar, but I believe it's true, it's the rise of Clemson. Because what Tennessee has to do is come into Georgia and get elite recruits. But an out-of-state school coming to Georgia is never going to be easy, especially when a program like Clemson is trying to come in and really go after a lot of the same players. And go back and look at the Mr. Tennessee Football Awards last year. Look how many people in the state of Tennessee were actually going to Clemson. T. Higgins, the wide receiver, among others. The rise of Clemson has taken a lot of players that back in the 90s would have gone to Tennessee. And when Jones's obituary is finally written as Tennessee coach, I think you have to look at some of the players that he did not get that went to other Southern schools, some of those not necessarily SEC schools.
Well, to me, when I look at Butch Jones' career at Tennessee, I look at it from kind of the emotional side. And to me, you can be a good X's and O's coach and be successful at mid-level schools. I think if you're going to go to some of the top-tier programs and top-tier jobs in the country, you have to have a way to get your players to play at a completely different level emotionally. They just have to have that edge. They have to be able to compete. They have to have the tenacity. You have to have the leaders, the dogs on your football team. They're going to get those guys riled up in the locker room. I can't imagine Butch Jones giving me a pregame speech.
Yeah.
I really can't. I don't know if I would even buy into what he's saying in the locker room. Unfortunately, I know a lot of LSU fans are going to hate me saying this, but I think that's the way that LSU is playing right now. Yeah. Ed Orgeron has already mentioned that he's backed off. He's not the dynamite head coach on the sideline. That's not good for Ed Orgeron and LSU. They need that team to play at a different level. They need to want to run through a wall when they get on the field, and I don't see that at either one of those programs. That, to me, is going to be the undoing of Butch Jones.
Let me make a quick final point on Tennessee. Neither one of us like what John Kelly said after the UMass game. We won the game. I ain't tripping. Then it was so close. I didn't like what Colton Jumper said on Saturday either, saying that Georgia's not nearly as good as we made them out to be. Listen, that's not the kind of thing you say after you lose a game 41-0. That's kind of a classless thing, kind of an unplugged, sort of disengaged type thing to say. With Kelly saying what he said, with Colton Jumper saying what he said, it's pretty clear there is no central theme. There's no central message right now that all the Tennessee players are buying into because they're all kind of going rogue, or at least a few of them kind of going rogue with some of their public comments.
Well, and that goes back to what I was exactly what I was just saying. You don't seem to have the dogs on that team that want to step into that role. If John Kelly's saying, hey, we got the win, that's good enough, and that's one of your central figures on offense, and then Colton Jumper's just saying, hey, you know what, we made him out to be a better team, what are you doing to fix that? I mean, you've got to step into that role where I'm going to get my teammates to play at a much higher level, and the head coach is the central figure in that, and he's not doing it right now at either one of those programs, LSU or Tennessee.
Here's Jacob Green's comment, who says, I wasn't one of those fans on Fulmer, but enough is enough. He's a great guy, but just not a head coach. It's time for change, and him and Fulmer shouldn't even be mentioned in the same breath. Butch has done nothing as football coach in Tennessee besides recruiting, and really a lot of those recruiting numbers that Butch Jones have brought in kind of inflated by the large numbers of the classes, if you want to be true here. I mean, some of those national rankings were just based on signing a really big class more so than bringing a lot of truly elite players. Tennessee fans continue to weigh in. We'll take your comments here on AT&T's SEC Country Live, and remind you that this is Mike Johnson, the former Alabama All-American. My name is Brandon Adams. Great to have you with us on the program. Of course, we're brought to you by AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. To lighten the mood here for a moment, let's turn our attention to LSU. And one fan, I guess a bit of a famous songwriter here, who has written songs before and kind of coming back here now with kind of a way of sort of summing up the LSU fan experience here in kind of one sort of ballad, I guess you will. The name of the song here is Mike the Tiger is Crying. We'll let you hear a little bit of this, and if you're an LSU fan, see if this kind of sums up the way you feel. And all SEC fans, let's be honest, we've all been here at one point in time or another. Take a look at Mike the Tiger was Crying.
Mike the Tiger's crying, endless miles promise change. Ran too many toss dives, watching was a pain.
bit of an idea of what's going on there. I do love the reference to running too many toss dives. And Riley Paul, is it Maturin? I guess that's how you say the name. Really creative guy for kind of coming up with this song there. So, I mean, is this just kind of summing it all up right here? The Mike the Tiger's crying now?
I promise LSU I'm not laughing at your football team.
I'm not either.
Listen, like you said, we have all been in that scenario.
Yeah.
We've all had losses like that. But to me it does. It sums up the way that LSU fans are feeling right now, because it goes later in the song and Ed Orgeron just starts grunting, and then he says he says things like football and one heartbeat, and then he just starts grunting again, and that's what you're getting right now at your head coaching position. There's not a lot of answers coming from Ed Orgeron. Hey, we're going to stick with Danny Etling. We're going to continue to do the same things. It's a rebuilding job. I think you're getting sold a bill of goods, in my opinion.
Do we have the Ed Orgeron grunting? Let me hear a little more of that.
Yo, 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 yo. Yo, yo. Football. Yo, 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 yo. One heartbeat.
That is very funny.
Oh, that's good stuff, man. Like I said,
Ed Orgeron kind of comes across a little bit like a Muppet right there. I know we had the one guy that kind of made him out to be the Cookie Monster a little bit. Orgeron right there, he kind of comes across like a Muppet, right? Like Ralph the dog playing the piano or something like that.
I just think it's so good because I feel like those are the answers that Ed Orgeron's giving the fan base right now. Hey, one heartbeat. Rah, rah, rah. It's just we don't have any answers as to, hey, what's going on exactly. And there was a lot of stuff, about the first play of the game going to the true freshman and the fumble, and then we didn't hear anything else, I feel like.
So we got a lot of laughing, smiling faces going across the screen there. Obviously, a lot of folks having fun with this. What I can't tell is, we'll hear from some of our LSU friends in the comment section. Are LSU fans able to laugh at that? Is that funny to them too, or is this kind of only funny if you're a Ole Miss, Bama, Auburn fan right now?
Yeah, I think this is probably not a laughing stock to LSU right now. It's too close, too soon for a lot of LSU
let's say
fans.
laughing stock. How about laughing matter?
Laughing matter. I still think it's too soon. Just went down to Troy. Give it a little buffer. Maybe by the end of the week we'll get a lot of LSU fans laughing.
There is an element though. Not to bring like in any way politics into this discussion, but how like some politicians, when they get like parodied on Saturday Night Live, it's like you can never see the politician as like a serious person again.
Yeah, it's tough.
All you can sort of see is the way they're kind of like drawn up to look on Saturday Night Live. There's an element of this where you have to worry about this for Ed Orgeron a little bit. That parody of Orgeron is so funny. Is the parody and parodies like that, is that going to end up dominating the way that you think of Orgeron? And even if he wins games, he can't ever make himself be a serious figure again.
Well, see, I think he already was. I mean, we've been talking about his voice and everybody. I mean, they were mocking him on the sideline there in Week 1 playing BYU. The game was so out of hand in LSU's favor that all the commentators and the sideline reporters are doing Ed Orgeron imitations. So it's not anything new. I think it's going to continue to go down that path. It's up to him, in my mind, to kind of right the ship and get people talking about LSU football instead of Ed Orgeron.
Yeah, Shannon Burgess in the comment section says, we've kind of earned the banter here. So, you do appreciate that from the LSU fans who are like, you know what? Hey, this is our year to take it on the chin. Certainly LSU was the one providing the knockout blows to a lot of teams for a long time. And so I guess this will be the year the LSU fans going to have to take that on the chin here a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, we've all been there. Alabama's had their ups and downs. When I was there, we had some downs. Georgia's had their ups and downs. Every program in the SEC has had their ups and downs. And so LSU, I'm sure that their turnaround will be faster than a lot of their fans even imagine.
Evan Snow bringing up a good point that the original video is like 10 years old. Colonel Reb is
Yeah,
fine.
it is.
So I heard everybody mention that, and I guess I've heard of that as a song before, but I don't know that I've ever heard that. I've heard people talk about it, but I don't really know that I've ever heard of it.
Yeah, you know where you can find it? SECcountry.com, right there with the story next to the LSU one.
Look at Mike doing a
little
little
plug right
cross
there.
promoting. My
That's
gosh.
right. Yeah, that's right. I feel good.
All of a sudden, my
Company
role leader is
man.
not as quite as well defined anymore.
Company
This
man, you know
company
what I'm
man
saying?
over
Yeah,
here
that's right.
doing all that. Well, speaking of that, let's move on here to item number 6. Another story that you can find covered at SECcountry.com. And I'm actually curious of your opinion on this. So Luke Del Rio out for the season. He does have his surgery, and he sends out a little tweet here, some well wishes to Florida fans on the heels of that recovery, saying surgery went great. Can't thank everyone enough for their well wishes and prayers. It's great to be a Florida Gator in times like these. Gives you a little Gator emoji there. But the thing I'm wondering is this. Do you think that Luke Del Rio, redshirt junior right now, has he taken his last snap as Florida quarterback?
I don't know. I think he has, and I said kind of over the weekend that I think that he that was the end of the line for him, and I think that Luke Del Rio is one of those guys that you could easily point to and say, you know what, he's got the perfect pedigree to become a head coach at some time. So maybe he does decide, you know what, I've had enough. I've been to 3 different colleges. I'm ready to move on with my career. But maybe not. Maybe he does see a window into getting in next year. But I think with Felipe Franks playing the rest of the year as a starting quarterback, kind of taking over that role on the team, probably improving a lot. I don't know that Luke Del Rio wants to go through an entire other offseason, risk a bunch more injuries to his shoulders just to get back on the field and be a backup quarterback. I don't know if I see that playing out.
Wes Gunn, to your point, says Del Rio is just delaying Florida's development at the quarterback position. And maybe there's some Florida fans who feel that way. I think there probably are some, because we heard some arguments for Franks back even during the offseason. A lot of that was sort of geared towards Malik Zaire, but there was a lot of that support for Felipe Franks being potentially a quarterback of the future here. But I'm actually even thinking beyond that. You know, I follow recruiting closely, and when you look at Matt Corral, the 2018 commitment for the Florida Gators, that's a guy who I believe is going to take the first snap of the season for Florida. I think he'll be the starter. They won't name him starter coming out of spring because coaches don't do that anymore. But he's going to start that first game, I believe, for Florida in the 2018 season, and he'll probably take every snap as long as he's healthy for Florida for the 3 or 4 years that he's there with the Gators. It's really it's a Matt Corral that kind of pushes Luke Del Rio to the sideline, or maybe even out of the program, a lot more so than a Felipe Franks did, because the truth is, I hate to be this way, but Franks is just not good enough. I mean, y'all, you can talk about, Franks' development and all that, but Franks has been there on the field, and he can't stay on the field. He's been on the program, can't stay on the field. I don't think that Felipe Franks is going to have to push Luke Del Rio to the sideline, but I believe that Matt Corral, the commit for the class of 2018, might be.
See, I guess this is just the old player in me, where I've been in these scenarios where, hey, I'm a junior, I'm a sophomore, and other guys are getting recruited behind me. They're going to have to show me. Matt Corral is going to have to show me. For everything that you feel like he does good in high school, college is another level. And so far, to me, I love Jim McElwain, but he has not shown the ability to really get any of these quarterbacks he's recruited to get to a different level. He hasn't. And until I see Jim McElwain do that with Felipe Franks and develop him, I don't know how he's all of a sudden just going to pull it off with Matt Corral. It's just not going to get better when he gets in.
There's not a single guy on the Florida roster that can throw the football like that.
Guess what? Most of the quarterbacks on Florida's roster look exactly like this in high school.
They do not.
Malik Zaire, recruit, goes to Notre Dame as a quarterback. Felipe Franks is a big recruit. I'm telling you right now, I'm going to have to see it. I'm not saying it won't happen. Matt Corral's a good player. I'm just going to have to see it. I'm one of those show-me guys when it comes to recruiting. Every year you have a 5-star that busts, and every year you have a 3-star that shows up and plays incredible.
That's true, but you will acknowledge this, though, that SEC teams do not blink about playing freshman quarterbacks anymore. Georgia's going to play a freshman quarterback every year, I guess, because they're going to play Justin Fields next year, too. So Georgia's going to play 3 freshman quarterbacks 3 years in a row. South Carolina played Jake Bentley. He was 17 years old.
Yeah. He's the face of that program.
Alabama played Jalen Hurts. That's the last team you expect to play a freshman quarterback. They did last year. So you would at least acknowledge, even if you're skeptical of kids who are in high school right now, about half the leagues played a freshman quarterback within the last year.
Yeah, and they have to. And I think that when you look at the circumstances from about 3 years ago, that you knew this was going to happen. You got to play some of these younger guys. But with the early signing periods and these guys enrolling in January, during their senior years of high school, that has changed a lot. Those guys that get to all, go through spring football. I'm not saying Matt Corral won't do it. I'm just saying that the timeline's not there for me to believe that Jim McElwain's going to get this guy to play at a high enough level in 6 months to where he's ready to take that first snap.
Patty Peterson asked a question. Let me bring this to you. Do you think that Florida's going to stick with Franks throughout the rest of the season, including the LSU game on Saturday, or do you think Malik Zaire gets a chance? We haven't heard Zaire's name since the season began.
Yeah.
Now that Del Rio is gone, extra change of pace, does Florida come a little closer to playing Malik Zaire here?
I'm not ready to say that Felipe Franks sticks in for the rest of the year. I think that when you start to look at the upside of what Malik Zaire does with his legs and this offensive line, back when they were playing Michigan and Malik Zaire was in there, they were not ready for that task against Michigan. I think they've gotten a lot better. I think their offensive line has continued to improve, have kind of entrenched themselves in being able to run that ball with Malik Davis in the backfield. You've run a ton of Wildcat. Why not do it with a guy like Malik Zaire in there that can actually throw the ball at a Wildcat, too? I think that might tend to go that route at some point this year.
Evan Snow says, geez, BA, you've never seen Colonel Reb is crying. A few other people said the same thing. Is it that funny? Did y'all watch Colonel Reb is crying?
I haven't watched it. I've only seen a snippet of it because I saw it on the website.
But several people are saying it's really, really funny.
Well, we'll have to check it out for sure.
Yeah, somehow I missed it. I'm not quite sure how I missed Colonel Reb is crying. But
how old is Colonel Reb is crying?
Somebody says like 10 years old.
Wow. Well, yeah, he must have been crying.
Yeah, Colonel Reb himself has been gone for a long time.
Is it back from when Ed Orgeron was
Are we
at
even
Ole
allowed
Miss?
to say Colonel Reb right now?
I don't even know. Is it back from when Ed Orgeron was at Ole Miss?
Probably.
I guess that's okay. Maybe we missed something. Yeah. I was playing back then.
We'll do our research on that. I apologize for not being fully briefed on the Colonel Reb is crying song. Nonetheless, we'll get more of your comments here coming up. Item number 7 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So we talked a lot yesterday about Auburn, Georgia emerging as legitimate contenders to Alabama. I believe that's true in both those teams' cases. Now, SI.com's Andy Staples had some nice things to say about Georgia and Auburn this week, but he did kind of pose a little bit of a question, or at least a possibility for Auburn and Georgia when it comes to contending with Alabama. Here's how Andy Staples tackled the subject we spent a lot of time on yesterday. Feels like maybe Auburn, maybe Georgia are the only SEC teams that can compete with Alabama. Coincidentally, those are probably the two teams they'll see at the end of the season. We'll know they'll play Auburn. We'll see about Georgia. For me, I'm taking the maybe out for both those schools. Yeah. Staples says maybe Auburn. Staples says maybe Georgia. I'm taking the maybe out. I'm not telling you they'll beat Alabama, but Auburn and Georgia can play with Alabama, and I think we'll see that in November from Auburn and in December from Georgia.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see the way it plays out. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier about how does Auburn have to win this weekend against Ole Miss? All they have to do is win, because all Auburn has to do is get to the Iron Bowl with one or less SEC losses, because then they can beat Alabama and they can show back up for rematch against Georgia or Florida, whoever comes out of the East. All those teams are playing at a high level. I love what Alabama's been doing the last couple of weeks. I don't know if Alabama is quite as good as they've shown the past couple of weeks. They have played out of their mind, and their backups have played out of their mind. But I think Auburn is a lot better than people give credit for, and I love what Georgia's been doing. I think they're a good football team. And so when you look at it from both of those kind of angles, that is going to be one heck of an end of the season as far as SEC play goes for those three teams.
Yeah, it should be a really interesting scenario. And listen, the SEC just sort of needs this, right? Yeah. The SEC needs an Auburn. It needs Georgia. I mean, I don't mind telling you this, that part of my desire in talking up these teams is because it was bad last year for the league. Only having one team kind of in that competition, only having one team really being in that national conversation, that's just not a good look for the SEC. So it rises the entire fortune of the league if you have Georgia and Auburn kind of in the mix here. And I believe that it's actually legitimately going to work out that way.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that you've kind of been waiting for some of these faces of the SEC that we've known historically to kind of step back up to that level. We're not getting it out of Tennessee. We're not getting it out of LSU this year. Florida kind of on the wall, and I think they have, I still think Florida has a path. I mean, they're going to play a down LSU team, a team that you thought would be a great game and that would show up and LSU would be world beaters. That's not the Florida that you're getting. So I think there still is a path there. Georgia still has to play Auburn in a cross-divisional game that Florida doesn't have to do. And so I think there still is a path there for Florida. But I'm with you. Those three teams and possibly Florida need to become the face of the SEC again if the SEC is going to rise back to the prominence that we've come to know in the last decade.
All right, a lot of comments coming in the comment section on really the last couple subjects. Let me see if I can hit all of these. By the way, Jeremy Pettis does remind us that Mike Price, the former Alabama coach, is now the interim at UTEP, so the tide is rolling all the way there to the U.S.-Mexico border, I guess. Greg Steele, to go back to what we said about Malik Zaire, the Florida quarterback, he says Zaire will not come in and run the Wildcat. Tony's the guy for that. And Greg's actually probably right about that. Yeah. The most troubling aspect, if you want to get on the field, if you're Malik Zaire, is the fact that Kadarius Toney is essentially kind of taking your corner from you.
Well, and I think that's my point. If Kadarius Toney is your best aspect of your offense right now when he comes in and runs the Wildcat, then why wouldn't you just plug Malik Zaire in there? Because I think he has just as much arm talent as we've seen Felipe Franks show. Felipe Franks has not wowed me with his arm, and if that's his angle, if that's his way to get on the field, why aren't you putting Malik Zaire in there that you can get a little bit of that dual threat on every snap and not just when you're in the Wildcat?
Max McDonald says Colonel Reb is from when Coach O was at Ole Miss, kind of clearing that up for us. Thank you about that. Chris Smith says, B.A., why do the Dogs always overlook Florida? Listen, I can promise you this. Georgia, as a team and as a fan base, is not overlooking Florida this year. On my podcast, Dog Nation Daily, we talk about that Florida game each and every day. This is a game that Georgia fans have circled because credit to Florida here. Georgia knows it can't take the next step as a program until it starts beating Florida again.
And credit us because we've been talking about that game. Between the two of us.
Between you and me.
Both BA and I both circled that game months ago, that game was going to decide the SEC East, and it certainly is starting to tend to look that way.
Chad Easton says that Bama, comparing to Auburn and Georgia, what we talked about a moment ago, Bama's on another level, period. Boy, I don't know. I mean, Auburn and Georgia both have recruited just fine. Not as well as Alabama has, but Georgia's number 3 in the country last year. Auburn's a fixture in the top 10. This idea that Alabama's got some overwhelming talent advantage over Georgia and Auburn right now, I just don't see it.
Yeah, I don't think there's a talent advantage. I think schematically, to me personally, I like the way for Auburn, I like the way they match up more against Alabama than I do for Georgia. And it's not that Georgia can't get it done, but I haven't seen somebody try to play Alabama's style of ball and beat Alabama in a long, long time. But to kind of come in with a running game and a pro-style offense and try to pound them in the mouth, I think it's going to be a tough task. Not that Georgia can't do it, but for me, I like Auburn's odds right now a little bit better than I do Georgia.
Chris Kelly says Bama's going to blow out Auburn and going to beat Georgia by 14 or more points, or Kentucky if it wins the East. Chris, thanks for including the Wildcats in your discussion there. Speaking of Alabama, let's do item number 8 here on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And Nick Saban gives his opponent for this Saturday a pretty significant compliment here. Now, I don't know if this is just more mind games from him for his team. He's been a master motivator for that group all season long, including games against Ole Miss and Vanderbilt over the last 2 weeks. But take a listen to what he says about Texas A&M in comparison to the other teams that Alabama has played, including a top 5 ranked Florida State team from the beginning of the season. Here's Nick Saban.
Texas A&M is the strongest team that we've played to this point. If you look at them from a holistic standpoint, they're a very explosive offensive team. They run the ball very effectively. They got really good running backs. Christian Kirk is, maybe the most explosive player, returner, receiver, runner of anybody in our league.
So that is Nick Saban saying that he thinks that Texas A&M is better than anybody they played, including Florida State, back when Florida State had a healthy DeAndre Francois. Are you buying that about Texas A&M?
I think it's, this is kind of crazy to me coming from Nick Saban, because I think he controls his words. He measures his words better than any politician I might have ever seen.
Yeah.
I mean, he is so measured the way he delivers these things. And almost like in the back of my mind, I want to ask Coach Saban if he forgot about the FSU game. If he just looks at just the SEC slate and we're on the SEC play and now that's all I'm worried about, and maybe he moved on from FSU. I don't think Texas A&M's even close to being what FSU was under DeAndre Francois. I just don't. I think they're moving in the right direction. I love what Kellen Mond's doing. I think Christian Kirk, like he just said right there, is as explosive as you'll find in the league. But they have not shown the consistency to me. They took really 3 quarters to get going against South Carolina last week and pull the come-from-behind win. They don't have 3 quarters to do that against Alabama. If they need until the 4th quarter to come around on offense, that John Chavis defense, they're going to be down by 30 by the time you blink in that 4th quarter. They've got to be better than that this week.
Yeah, I've made my point about Texas A&M here a few times. First of all, you're right. With DeAndre Francois healthy, Texas A&M is not better than Florida State. They're just not. The offensive line for Florida State's pretty bad, so maybe that's an opening for the conversation, but I'm still going to take a healthy Seminoles team over Texas A&M. But I still think Texas A&M could be fine this season. I think they may win more games by the time the year's over with than the experts thought they were going to win before the season started. But the Alabama game almost doesn't count right now. I mean, Alabama has shown you over the last couple of weeks they are on such a roll that I don't think you can make any kind of evaluation of Texas A&M right now. As good as Christian Kirk, who Saban just talked about, is, and as much as A&M may be figuring a couple things out, I think you got to give them credit for the victory against South Carolina last week. It's almost like put all that on hold, and hopefully you come out of the Alabama game with the same mindset you went into it with, because Alabama right now is probably going to beat you up.
Yeah, we kind of approached that when we talked at the top of the show about, is Nick Saban going to get somebody fired in the next few weeks? I don't know if the ADs are going to hold their coaches to that high of a standard right now. Alabama, I mentioned it, I don't think they're as good actually as they're playing right now. I love Alabama as the team. I don't think they're 63 points better. I don't think they have 63 points more talent than Ole Miss has right now. I think it's a psychological aspect right now to going up against Alabama. Once you get down by 14, 21 points in the first quarter, like the last 2 opponents have, they think, man, that lead's almost insurmountable right now, and they just turn a corner and go into a funk, and they just kind of disappear for the rest of the game. I'm anxious to see how Kellen Mond, a freshman quarterback, does respond if they get down early against Alabama this week.
Well, Jeremy Pettis thinks he knows. He says that Alabama defense is going to tee off on the freshman quarterback, and I'd imagine that was probably true. I mean, if I look at those next 4 games for Alabama, the A&M game, the Arkansas game, the Tennessee game, the LSU game, I'd give Texas A&M a chance more than those other 3 teams. Would be a lot of teams, but A&M does not feel like a good matchup for Alabama. It just doesn't.
Not at this point. And I think historically you've seen Kevin Sumlin be able to pull this off with his offense, and he's done some great things against Nick Saban's defense. Kellen Mond's just not Johnny Manziel. They don't have Mike Evans on the field right now. Christian Kirk's great. I don't know that he's Mike Evans good. And for that, for the offensive line, I just don't see it, man. I don't see the running game, and I don't see a path to victory right now for Texas A&M. I haven't felt good the last couple of weeks about covering the spread for Alabama, and maybe I'm wrong because I've gotten a lot of bets wrong here recently, but I feel like this one shapes up to be more lopsided in a lot of ways than either of those games have.
That is Mike Johnson. My name is Brandon Adams. It's AT&T SEC Country Live. AT&T, proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Let me move on. Talk about item number 9 here on our first and 10 list, and kind of an interesting announcement from LSU. going back to Danny Etling at quarterback, he's going to be the guy. And I want to read you this quote from Ed Orgeron. I want to read it to you because I think it's a little bit easier to kind of parse the words here without having to hear the growl of Orgeron, at least on this quote here for a moment. He says, Danny is our starter. He is our starter. Hopefully we can go 4 quarters with him in a very big football game, referencing Florida on Saturday. We've never planned to play Miles in SEC games, just to throw him in there. We were just preparing Miles in case Danny got hurt. Here's the problem with that, and you tell me if I'm being unfair. That last part's not true. And, you can give, or at least I don't believe it's true, this notion that they were only preparing Miles Brennan in case Danny Etling got hurt. They have been in a full-fledged dress rehearsal for the last few weeks, an audition to see who the better quarterback was. Nothing is gained by pretending that's not true right now, is it?
Yeah.
Now, this to me is another example of Orgeron kind of getting it wrong because I think he's telling an untruth about his quarterback situation. You want to go back to Etling for the Florida game? You actually may have the evidence on your side to do that. It sounds like, based on what I saw from the game, Etling was playing better against Troy than Miles Brennan had been. But don't tell me that you weren't thinking about making Miles Brennan your quarterback because it's obvious that you were.
Well, I think that's Ed Orgeron kind of covering his tracks, kind of putting Miles Brennan in meaningful snaps, not snaps that were like games that were out of hand. Meaningful snaps the last couple of weeks. A game you could have lost to Syracuse and a game against Troy that you did lose. Miles Brennan threw interceptions in both of those games. So to me, it's Ed Orgeron kind of backtracking a little bit and saying, you know what, we just wanted him to get some snaps and see what he had. It's not true. I'm with you. I think you put him in there for meaningful snaps for a reason because you wondered if he would spark the offense or give you something Danny Etling wasn't giving you, and he didn't. It didn't turn out in a good way. He throws picks the last couple of weeks. Looks overmatched at time in some of those snaps against lesser teams. And now you're turning back to Danny Etling going, you know what, you were really our guy all along.
See, here's the thing. If I was Ed Orgeron, this is what I'd say. And I know LSU fans don't want me as your head coach. I totally get that. But there's a way to spin this in a way that also builds up Danny Etling because I think that's what Ed Orgeron is trying to do here. You could say, we wanted to put Etling through a competition this year because we believe that Miles Brennan is a better quarterback situation we probably had in 2016. We wanted to see could Etling actually beat out Miles Brennan because we think Brennan's got a bright future. And you know what? Danny Etling has won that competition. So as we move into the Florida game on Saturday, we want our best quarterback, the guy that's practicing the best and playing the best, and that guy's Danny Etling. That's a great statement for Ed Orgeron to make, and frankly, that's the one he should have made as opposed to telling us that they never considered Brennan when obviously they did.
Yeah, not only that, but if I'm Ed Orgeron right now, I got to step out. Maybe he just doesn't want to be in the crosshairs. Maybe people will second guess him. Danny Etling, for me, is not the problem with this offense right now. Yeah. You're talking about a proud LSU rushing offense that had 167 yards rushing last week, and 57 of those came from Danny Etling. Yeah. So this is not yesterday's LSU team. The problem has been on the offensive line and the ability to run the ball when they need to that we haven't seen from LSU in 10 years maybe, since they have not been able to run the ball when they want to against teams like that. Troy's linebackers outplayed LSU's team on Saturday. There's no doubt about it. They were flying downfield, making tackles in the backfield, and LSU just had no answer for it on their offense.
Quick final point for me on this. This is one of those things, there are a lot of them over the course of the season that I was probably wrong about because I thought when LSU got to its most important games this season, it's Miles Brennan who would be playing at quarterback. But the truth is, I've seen this with my own eyes, Etling is just better than Brennan right now. And so even though I assumed I'd want Brennan playing for LSU against Florida, I actually think Etling's the right call.
And it's interesting this came up because we were just almost having the same conversation about the Florida offense for next year. And to me, I see the Florida offense for next year playing out almost exactly like this one has. And for all the questions you have about Felipe Franks and Danny Etling, I'm going to have to see the young guy come in and look better in those scenarios. And neither one of these programs has shown the ability to really develop that quarterback. And so I don't know if Matt Corral is going to be the answer next year the same way I don't know that Miles Brennan's the guy right now.
Let me hit item number 10 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. I have some great news for you. Well, actually, it's not great news for me because this is crowding into my marketplace a little bit. I'm a little bit of a podcast guy myself. And, well, I've got some competition out there because apparently Les Miles has his own podcast now as well. He released this video on Twitter. We won't show you the whole thing because it's a little long, which is probably not a great testament to the kind of podcast that Miles is going to do. But we will give you a little idea of Miles' attempt to sell himself on video. Does this feel like a podcast that you'd want to watch? Take a look.
The reason that I'm here is because you have exactly what we want. You're smart, you're discerning, and you will show up week after week. Thank you. I know you have a lot of options, but let me tell you why this is the program for you. This is an athletic family. You'll enjoy that because you
So you
want
kind of
a
get the deal
perspective.
here. He's pretending to be the coach, recruiting the prospect. In that case, it's us to actually listen to his podcast. Would you listen to a Les Miles podcast?
I would. You know, we've talked about Les Miles a couple times. I find
Who
the guy
are you
entertaining.
writing to, by the way?
I was trying to answer somebody on.
Peace?
Yeah, I'm trying to answer somebody on here.
Listen, I do all these sort of stealth, subtle comment responses all the time. Nobody ever sees me. You're over there typing with one finger. You got to be a little quicker on the trigger than that.
I'm sorry. I'm writing Kevin Grubb back right now.
You got to be a little quicker on the trigger. I didn't mean to call you out, but you got to be a little quicker on the trigger.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry right now. I'm not the typer that you are, Bia. You mentioned it. You're
all
a
right,
podcast.
let's read what Mike wrote. He said, Kevin Grubb, the bottom line is it's been 9 years since Bama went undefeated. Odds are they'll lose at some point. That's not a bad point, actually.
No, well, he's been, why does everybody keep questioning Alabama? And I agree with it. Alabama's the best team. Nobody's questioning Alabama. But the thing is,
our team is not allowed to be questioned. I didn't realize Alabama had won every game it ever played.
That's my point. I feel like we get this comment, a lot. I feel like, a lot of people are saying, hey, how could you question Bama? We're not questioning Bama, but the bottom line is, it's been since 2009 that they went undefeated. They've lost games each year since then. So it's not fair to say they're just going to be world beaters and beat everybody because the odds are it's not going to happen. We haven't seen it for quite some time.
Diedrich Frazier about Les Miles says, no, I wouldn't listen to that podcast. He's boring. And you know what, Diedrich? I've said this to you a million times, and I'm telling you, I've been proven right on this. Les Miles is sneaky boring. Everybody thinks he's some great character because he eats grass. The truth is, this was him selling his podcast. We just heard it in 25 seconds or whatever it was we played. That's his best foot forward. That put me to sleep. Les Miles is actually boring.
I loved it.
People don't realize this, but Miles is boring.
He gave the recruiting pitch. He goes, you know why you're going to watch this? And he did. I don't know what he's got lined up for it. I don't know if this is going to have be a bunch of guests involved, or he's going to give his thoughts on every college football game, or give his thoughts on LSU. I don't know what it is. But I'm telling you right now, people are going to tune in because Les Miles is an entertaining character.
He's really not. I've told you that before, and he lost his. He didn't get his broadcast job the way he wanted to. I'm telling you, this is one of those things I'm right about. I told you this summer that people don't realize this, but Les Miles is actually boring, and the truth is he is.
I think it's going to be about how it's framed. I want to see Les Miles. I want to see him do the interviews himself. I don't want to see Les Miles getting interviewed. We've seen that a million times. I want Les Miles to write the questions for his guests that he's going to have on his podcast. I think if they frame it like that, has the ability to be a great podcast because Les Miles is going to ask some crazy questions.
All right, we got a really interesting champion of life coming up today. It's not so much funny today, but I am kind of curious about what Mike thinks about it. We'll do that here in a moment. Before that, though, of course, AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live, AT&T, entertainment your way. Let's do our AT&T look ahead here. And on Tuesdays on the show, for the next few weeks, I'm going to kind of remind you that we're getting closer and closer to those first college football playoff rankings. You may not actually realize this because we haven't talked about this, but Tuesday, October the 31st, that's actually Halloween night, the first college football playoff rankings come out. Right. So what happens this Saturday, what happens over the course of the next couple of weeks, really going to shape those rankings. And do you have a sense of who you view as your top four right now? I feel like this is not a great conversation to have at this point because there is such a strong agreement that there are really 5 teams right now kind of distancing themselves from the others. We haven't seen Alabama challenge the SEC yet. But you've got Alabama, you've got Clemson, you've got Penn State, you've got Washington probably and Oklahoma. Is there any kind of interesting wrinkle you can throw into that discussion right now?
I think there is. And listen, by the way, you mentioned it. There's a reason this doesn't come out until Halloween because they haven't seen really enough of a body of work to really rank these teams. I like TCU. Really? In the Big 12. I really do. I think what they showed against Oklahoma State, a team in Oklahoma State that to me has so many firepower weapons on offense, I think TCU's got the defense to be able to get this done in the Big 12. I think they might be a sneaky contender in that ranking when it comes out.
That's really interesting. On October the 31st, are there 3 SEC teams in the top 10?
Ooh, yeah, absolutely.
Auburn, Georgia,
think,
Alabama.
And those teams, we've mentioned a couple times, it's going to be a round robin at the end of the year. So on October 31st, I think you're definitely going to see it because I don't know if either one of those teams will get matched up other than that Florida-Georgia game.
And by the way, the people who worked on the show said we shouldn't do this with the AT&T look ahead. That was actually a really good segment. People said that we shouldn't look ahead of the playoff rankings.
Yeah, what do you guys know in there?
See, I told you, that actually kind of worked as a segment here today. All right, let's close up the show the same way we always do, much the same way that Tennessee coach Butch Jones, at least for right now, is on the search for his champions of life there at Tennessee. We do the same thing here on AT&T's SEC Country Live. And today's came from Friday's USC-Washington State game. Mike picked the upset here. Wazoo does win against USC, and after the game, a USC player gets a little revenge. This is not easy to see, so watch your screen closely. You're going to see a USC player just absolutely wallop a Washington State fan. Spot shadow there, and boom!
That was completely on purpose.
It's totally on purpose, right?
You can see him start to lean into it, and I'm going to tell you right now, I've been in this situation. I would have loved to have gone this route, but I definitely didn't. It's
funny that you bring this up because in my life, I'm a lot more likely to have been the fan getting run over, and you're a lot more likely to be the player doing the running over.
Oh, man, it's tough.
So do you fault the USC player for essentially committing assault against the Washington State fan?
It's such a different day and age. When I was playing, cell phones were becoming a big thing.
Different day and age? I wouldn't have wanted to do that to me in 2009.
Cell phones, I was in college when the first iPhone came out. Now everybody's holding a camera, and so you can't get away with things like that. But I'm sure that's not the first time it's ever happened when fans rush the field.
How much must that have hurt?
Yeah, he got looked. But the funny part was he got up and he was mad. He got up and looked around, was like, "Who hit me?" I thought that was the best part of that entire video. He looked so upset about that USA player hitting him.
Who says the Pac-12 is soft? By the way, the fans may be a little tougher than the teams are a little bit.
Taking licks, right? This lady's about to return a punt.
Yeah, no doubt. That's Mike Johnson. My name's Brandon Adams. By the way, quick programming note: Mike's on assignment tomorrow. Will not be with us, but we'll still have AT&T's SEC Country Line. We'll see Mike again back on Thursday's show. I will remind you of this. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. Give us a rating and review. That's a huge help. Share the show with your friends on Facebook. That lets them know we're talking SEC here each and every day on AT&T's SEC Country Live. We're back 3 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. Y'all have a great day. We'll look forward to seeing you then.